With that, let's go to the panel discussion. I'm very happy that we have Samira, Jock, and Peter with us. And I would appreciate if you could briefly introduce yourself before we go into the discussion. Samira, do you want to start with the introduction?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Samira, obviously. I worked for like almost 13 years in the technology field. Looking back, half of it was actually in innovation platforms, and the other half was in transactional platforms. And interestingly enough, the innovation part of my career was in the automotive field, the software layer of the automotive field. I can maybe talk more about it in certain points that we will tackle. And I worked in Egypt and in Germany, and then I founded my first startup, a carpooling platform, where people share rides when they go to work or to the university. And then currently I'm part of Shuna, which is a platform for dry crops and agricultural products, where we have at one side the farmer and the other side, not the consumer, but the final processor before the consumer.
All right, thank you very much. Jock, do you want to continue?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Jock Basutil. I am the founder of a company called Product People Limited, which is a product management company. I've been freelancing as a product manager for the last 10 years, and then I've been working in product for about 10 years before that as well, as an employee. So I've had a chance to work with lots of different places and lots of different organizations in the private and public sectors. I was formerly the interim head of product for UK government, and for the Ministry of Justice, and I've worked at organisations from relatively large ones like Metria, down to relatively small startups and scale-ups like TickTrack and Prolific. And I'm also the author of a book, The Practitioner's Guide to Product Management, which is really a collection of stories about how I suck at product management and gradually figured out how to suck less at product management. So yeah, have a read if you fancy a laugh at my mistakes.
Is there a digital copy?
Yeah, there is. There's a Kindle version. Yep.
Okay, nice.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jock. Peter?
Thank you. My name is Peter Stadlinger, originally from Germany, but I've lived in the States for the last almost 20 years now. I've worked for a couple of different companies that offer or are offering platforms that started with Adobe, then Salesforce, and now Freshworks. At Adobe, that was, I would say, I was part of the journey of building a platform, because obviously Adobe is known for products like Photoshop and whatnot. But about 10 years ago, Adobe started a journey of building a platform for enterprise companies to deliver marketing and like visual experiences in general, and therefore was building a platform. And when I then joined Salesforce, Salesforce was already a platform with a few different aspects that Hans-Bert already covered. And now at Freshworks, we are back at let's say scaling and delivering a platform at scale, similar to, let's say, where Adobe was. So with different experiences, I hope I can provide an experience or like the perspective of what it means to actually build one or maintain it or to further scale it.
All right, thank you, Peter. Well, what do you think when you put yourself into the shoes of a product manager who is responsible for a particular product? Is the subject of platforms directly relevant for that product manager?
Yeah, absolutely, right? I mean, maybe I'll go first because I just talked a little bit about different platforms. When I think of being a product manager for a platform, the first thing I think of is how much harder it oftentimes is than when you have a non-platform product. And the reason I say that is that if you have your own little product, your P&L is very much easy to digest, right? Like you can pretty much understand like what's needed to maybe move the needle. When it comes to platform, it's much harder, right? Because oftentimes you're either doing it at no cost, right? Or the revenue that you generate is oftentimes indirectly or hidden, not always, but sometimes. And therefore, it's even harder to then, let's say, fight for resources or to get certain things prioritized. So the first thing that I think of is how much harder it actually is to do platform product management.
Mm-hmm. When you say that, are you talking about innovation platforms or transaction platforms?
I would say innovation, right? But I would say even for transaction platforms, like when we talked about it earlier, right? Like you gave Uber as an example, right? The P&L is obviously very, very hard, and you basically have to convince a lot of different stakeholders how additional and further investments will then eventually pay off. And oftentimes that's like a gamble, right? That sometimes works out, sometimes doesn't work out, and that means there's a lot of moving pieces to making your business case. And I would say that in both cases, whether it's like a transactional or let's say technology, it's equally challenging, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Jock?
So for me, the thing about platforms is they need to have some kind of gravitational pull, and that's the difficult bit. So whether it's a multi-sided marketplace, or whether it's a technology platform that enables other businesses to build their own things on top of that, you still got to worry about how to attract people to use your platform over anything else. So if you look at the dominant platforms, you've got Amazon, which is both on the marketplace side of things, a transactional platform, and on the AWS, Amazon Web Services side, it's a innovation platform. And you have to kind of look at these things and say, well, why did they become successful? And in many cases, it's because they were able to offer different sides of the marketplace or different sides of the consumer supplier chain or whatever else, an option that was cheaper, quicker, and easier than doing it for themselves. So who is going to, in their right mind, invest in building a data center when you can just use Amazon Web Services and compute on demand? Netflix, when they wanted to build their streaming platform, didn't have the money to go and invest in building their own data center and their streaming services and global content distribution networks. So they relied on Amazon Web Services, and they're still one of the largest customers of AWS. So this whole idea of platform has to be fulfilling some kind of unmet need in the marketplace, something that connects two sides of a value chain or two sides of a marketplace together that are traditionally difficult to connect. And providing it can do that, a platform can be successful. But as so many places, so many startups see, it's difficult to get people to gravitate towards your platform.
Yeah. When you think of a product manager,
sorry, Samir, do you want to come in on that?
No, it's okay. Hans, continue, and I will come in. Don't
yeah,
worry.
it's also a question to Samira. When you think of a product manager of a let's say normal product, which would not be considered as a platform as of now, what does the concept of platform mean? Does it mean that every product should be turned into a platform, or does it mean that every product needs to build interfaces to platforms? What does it mean?
Thank you, actually, Hans, for saying that, because I was going to build on the original question, which was for product managers in general. Should we learn about platforms or not, and how important is the topic? And I would say to go back and ask ourselves what business is the product manager is in. So for example, if I'm working in a startup that is helping people organize their own finances. So this initially is not a platform business. So I need first to figure out the best experiences, the best interface, the best experience I'm gonna give to the consumer first on his own, figure this completely, and then maybe I can do something like sending money to other people. So moving this from being just an individual or non-platform to being a platform. So it depends on the industry, the stage, and the value proposition that the startup or like the business that the product manager is working in is actually offering. So the value proposition is offered initially from the startup itself, or is it from a third-party stakeholder? So it depends on that. And on the stage, I would say how important is to know and to learn about the platform versus learning about funnels, for example, and mastering your acquisition and retention funnels of a single user.
Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that, Peter?
Yeah, for sure. I think that makes a lot of sense. The one thing that I would maybe add is similar to what Jock actually said. Like the first and foremost, I would argue that the customer comes first, right? That means you have to kind of build something that attracts people to even invest and flock, or like even like center around your platform, and then and that in itself has like the ask or like the requirement that is like 10x better than whatever else they did. Like let's say when we think of Stripe, right? I think I was just talking about that to my girlfriend the other day, right? We oftentimes forget how hard it was to get approved and get like the account details from the bank. And then in the beginning, the way they kind of started that is, it's a crazy story, right? How they never implemented technology that allowed you to automatically request those account details, but they were the ones that sent the faxes and the fax to the bank and then gave you the details. So that first 6 months or like the first year, I think it was even that long that they never implemented any kind of technology, but they really focused on giving you that 10x experience. And the 10x experience came from you not having to deal with the bank yourself, but to make it easier for you to just give them whatever information you had, and then they'll take care of all the mess and what's needed to get them the details. So that's one thing I would add, is that the way I kind of always look at that is obviously starting with a P&L is a little boring, and like why would you start with a spreadsheet when it comes to product management? But if you can secure financing, right, then all of the following conversations and topics are almost mute. But if you can secure financing, whether you raise venture capital or you are able to secure resources within the company, but then the next step is obviously to really ruthlessly focus on that 10x experience, because without that experience, and no one's going to really bother going with your platform.
Mm. Jock?
Peter, show me any product manager that doesn't go to spreadsheets straight away.
I know, it's crazy, right? At the end of the day, we're all in Excel. Yeah.
I want to actually add a point based on what Peter said, like looking actually at what the customer really wants. So if we look at the customer of Facebook versus the customer of Uber, the customer of Uber or the rider of Uber, he really or she wants to be on a ride, regardless of the driver is from a platform side or if it's an Uber employee. What they really want is to have a safe ride from point A to point B. But if you look at the customer of Facebook, they are actually interested in the other person in the platform. So here you can differentiate between platforms that are like it's built on actually the other people versus the platforms like Uber. It's good for the business model, it's good for the business, it's good for the scalability. But one side of the business is not really interested if the other side was a platform or an employee.
I I think the concept of customer when it comes to platforms is kind of a little bit ambiguous, because really, if you look at the most successful, say for example, innovation platforms, essentially Amazon is making, and in fact in both cases, Amazon is making money on every transaction. It's making money in every bit of business that goes through their platform. So actually, they don't really have a concept of customers in the kind of traditional model, because everyone is contributing some way, because everyone is merely interacting through the platform to conduct business. So they're kind of an intermediary. Yeah. So from their perspective, they do need to satisfy lots of different sets of people's needs. If you look just at the the Amazon Web Services, they're not just satisfying the needs of people consuming the APIs, but also the customers of the people consuming the APIs. They need to make sure that they're fit for purpose. So it's kind of, you're either one stage removed, but you have to be generating value and that 10x experience, as Peter was saying, for all sides of that platform. But you make your money by doing what Amazon and Google and Microsoft does, which is getting a slice of the action every single time somebody does something.
But the paying user of, let's say Amazon, the one who's purchasing, is actually benefiting from the variety. So if Amazon have a lot of third-party sellers, I'm benefiting. And not only the quantity, so it's the quantity and the variety. Compared to Uber, you're not really making as a paying customer, you're not. It's not really different for you. The variety is what you want is the quantity, or making sure that there is an Uber driver. But it doesn't really make a difference if the car is blue or if it's white. Not like when it comes to Amazon selling products, and the variety is really important.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the utility of the service. If you had Uber, people wouldn't use Uber if there were no taxi drivers available to actually respond to the call. Similarly, you wouldn't have many taxi drivers going on if nobody was using the app to call the taxis. So it's that tricky chicken and the egg problem of needing both sides of that kind of transactional marketplace. And then how you generate that. So I love the fact that there's a saying where if you can't see where the product is, you are the product. Yeah. And so places like Google, they created this free to use search engine, got everyone using it. They got that gravitational pull to pull everyone onto using them as the one and only way to search the internet. And then it was actually an advertising platform.
When you think of transaction platforms like Uber, do you see any examples that the same role or the same person does both the software product management and the platform management, or is that usually separated in your experience?
Yeah, from what I see, it's oftentimes separated, right? So you have, from my experience, typically, let's call them the inbound product manager, right? They are responsible for delivering the piece of functionality. And then what I've seen is that oftentimes the introduction of like a growth product manager, right? Where like they're trying to hack it and trying to think of creative ways to drive adoption, to get it like out there into the market, and to get people to even consider using it, right? And in our parlance, that could then be the outbound product manager, right? So I've seen that, like maybe like in the beginning, it's a little bit of both. But I would say as soon as there's like some fundamental functionality that is available, that's when I see that separation of concern, and to kind of split it into growth and let's say platform and growth, right? Whereas like if you kind of look at it from the outside, it's simply outbound and inbound.
I agree with Peter. And in my previous startup, we first had both in one role, but again, because we were a small team. But we would see a huge difference in growth when we separated the two roles, and someone was focused only on growth and someone focused on the tech. And we used to have a weekly meetings for prioritization for the whole strategy. Honestly, it was a mess because like everyone was have their own focus. But the good thing is we're able to like get different perspectives into our roadmap, and both perspectives were really important. And to have them separated is really important, because if you have only one, it will depend on the tendency of this person. If he's growth focused but not taking care of the technology part, there will be a mess. If he is technology or she is technology focused but not growth focused, you will find your growth is moving slowly.
Jock, you want to add something to this?
So in terms of roles and responsibilities, I guess, yeah, you know, I agree with everyone else on this one, is that there comes a point where separation of concerns is necessary, because actually the purpose of a person responsible for a platform is going to be different to people providing products built upon that platform. So one of the experiences I had was when I was working in government, and this was when there'd been like kind of a digital revolution, and it'd been like a good few years into this now, and so there are lots of organizations distributed across government, all federated, so none actually centrally controlled. They're all actually independent, and they're all doing their own thing with their own budget, their own people. So you've got all these different, you know, separate departments and ministries floating around doing their own digital things. And gradually over time, what you found was people were reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. So people were implementing their own, you know, payment or their own notification or their own email services. And so gradually what happened is these people got together and realized that they're all reinventing the wheel. They're all spinning, you know, cycles, rebuilding stuff that people have already done before. Okay. And so there was this government as a platform idea, or government as a service idea, where they'd start to just build common things. Like, if you're going to do payments, here's a generic payments platform that you can just implement in your own thing, which means you don't have to write it yourself. If you need to send out notifications to people from your service or from your product, then here's a generic notification thing. If you need to send out paper stuff in the mail, here's a generic way to kind of send your stuff to get it printed and sent out. And so by implementing these modules, it kind of emerged out of the realization that everyone was reinventing the wheel and just repeating themselves over and over. But for those things to be successful, the platform manager, the platform product manager, had to go around and make sure that what they created was really, really easy to consume by the development and engineering teams using it, but also met the needs of the services, the applications that were doing it. So there'd be no point in having a payments platform that could only handle 10,000, you know, simultaneous transactions when you've got 64 million people in the UK plus, and, you know, a large proportion of those are adults who could be using the platform at any given time. So you have to anticipate the needs, both of the people implementing or directly interfacing with your platform, but also with their own customers and their own use cases and so on. And I think that's the really challenging part, because you've got such this broad set of requirements, this broad set of needs that you need to take account of.
That's an interesting point. That's actually currently being discussed in Germany, because they discuss how to give money to people because of the energy crisis. And they found out that the governmental systems are not able to do more than 100,000 transfers per day.
Nice. Yeah.
When you look at the current landscape of transaction platforms, almost all of them are in B2C. Why don't we see more B2B transaction platforms?
But there are B2B transactional platforms. Maybe they are not
Actually, we
widely
are
known as the
B2B
B2C ones, but there are like platforms for B2B deals, like looking for certain suppliers, and also for export, like in the current startup I'm involved in. We're using a platform to export the dry crops. So in the platform, you can find like request for proposals for or a request for crops from other countries. So there are, but they are not as widely as known for us as consumers. Maybe they are known for each industry.
Yeah, because yeah, exactly. Because I would say that if you just go by the quantity of platforms, right, like by consumer versus business, I would probably agree that it's probably way more consumer-centric platforms, transactional platforms. But let's say if that was true, like even if let's say even if we were to like kind of discount that out, I would say one argument that would say that why they're maybe like more on the consumer side is that, let's say, businesses, like it's like the typical situation, right, where a business would rather try to build it themselves than to rely on another business to do that. And then only over time, certain B2B use cases have become so obvious to basically outsource and to not build it yourself that it takes a little bit of time to do that. Whereas, let's say, as a consumer, it will never ever cross your mind to build your own Uber application, right? Or because you basically rely on a business to build technology for you. Whereas, let's say, beyond the reason that I mentioned in the beginning, that there are just like fewer B2B platforms to begin with, that companies, in most cases, build it or like try to build it themselves. And there was one more thought, and I don't want to like become metaphysical, right? But like technically, what I realized is that any B2B product is to a certain degree, let's say, a platform. Let's say, at least from a technology standpoint, because like often as what I see is that every product that I've product managed used to be built by each company themselves. Let's say when you look at a content management system, or when you look at a CRM, like if you go back 10, 20 years, even today, oftentimes the main competitor that we deal with is an in-house built platform, or like in-house built product. And then what you offer is a product that kind of makes it, standardizes it across different customers and needs. And that's like another observation that came to mind, where you say that in the B2B world, you still have to deal with the fact that each company thinks they should build it themselves. And then you could maybe even make the case that those that do build it themselves, like Apple, like they're not known to build everything themselves, that's typically a sign for them doing well in general.
Jock?
Yeah, I was just going to say there's a really interesting guy called Simon Wardley, who some of you may have come across. He kind of has this idea around how to map out the evolution of, software products, hardware products, whatever. And he essentially puts forward the argument that everything gradually goes from being magical and new to being custom one-offs, to being productized, to being made more commoditized, to being utility. So if he gives the example of energy, electricity generation, before when Tesla was there, making, Nikolai Tesla, I mean, was generating electricity. It was like a circus sideshow, and then gradually people started building their own generators are all customs. They don't talk to each other, they don't interoperate with each other, and then gradually they standardize. Now everyone's working the same voltages, the same currents, and so on. And then gradually we end up with a situation, we've got these huge generation systems that do all the stuff for us, and we just plug something into the wall and we have available to utility electricity. You can see the same thing with Amazon Web Services, arguably, as well. The evolution from magical to utility, consume on demand. So if everything kind of is generally moving towards that commoditization, towards that utility mode, then yeah, gradually everything else will gravitate towards that. The commonly used functions will become utility in the grand scheme of things. And part of the challenge here, I think, is to recognize which stuff has already made that leap, and therefore it is not worth at all us trying to build again for ourselves. You know, who's going to build a payment transaction, you know, broker when you've got Stripe, or when you've got, you know, any of the other ones out there? Who's going to build their own data center when you've got Amazon Web Services or Google Compute or Microsoft Azure? Yeah. So I guess the thing here is, first of all, recognizing, are you in a market that's already made that leap towards commoditization and utility? And do you really want to try and build it yourself? Or have you genuinely found an opportunity where that hasn't happened yet and everyone's still dealing with custom stuff, or maybe it's made the leap to product, but it hasn't been turned into that utility service? You know, I like the example of SpaceX. It's kind of like rocketry as a service. They've basically brought the cost down, and they've made their platform reusable, and they've basically made it available to everyone. So if you want to stick something in a rocket and fire it into space, you've got SpaceX to provide that service to you. So you don't have to worry about building your own rocketry platform anymore.
It's like, I think it's like a perfect example. Like I think like when you hear Jeff Bezos talk about his business, right? He says he's trying to build a platform that allows other businesses to build on top of that. So perfect example there.
Yeah, but still, I mean, in general, we still see emerging competition in areas where we may not have expected it, right? So currently, when you think of the database market, it has been dominated by Oracle for a long time, but suddenly there are new players who seem to really hurt Oracle. So that is interesting to watch. Yep. So that may be a bit in contradiction to what you said, right? That when everything goes towards one big existing solution, there may still be room for competitive offerings.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, well, assuming Oracle is an example of a monopoly, which it isn't, and hasn't been for a very long time, the thing here is that when something comes along that's cheaper, quicker, easier to implement, then of course people are going to use different stuff. Who on earth is going to go and shell out for an Oracle license when you can use Postgres or MariaDB or something else that's free and open source, you know, and basically does what they need? If you don't need something that specifically requires the power of an Oracle database, then you're not going to bother paying for it. And then that itself has been made into a service. Now you don't need to spin up your own servers. You just get RDB off Amazon Web Services again. So, you know, again, it's that kind of idea of, if you don't innovate, if you don't recognize that trend towards commoditization, these upstarts are going to steal your lunch.
I would also want to add that whenever a platform is so big, there is always a room for competition in niche markets. So either it's the smaller startups that will not pay a fortune for Oracle, or even on the consumer, like you can see this on the consumer side. So Amazon is great to buy anything, but for me, if I will buy fashion, I will not buy from Amazon, because they didn't tailor their platform for specific, very niche or like niche needs. So one platform to conquer all, I wouldn't say so, because there will always be room for niche and specialization.
Anything, Mohammed raised his hand. I'm not sure if that's by mistake or.
Yeah, it's not by mistake. I have a question, but maybe I thought when you finish this point. So my question was about, like, you know, the previous part when you asked them about the platform manager, and Samira said something very important. In small teams, usually maybe the two roles played by one person, but in other cases, my question here for the panelists, what should we do? Like, if in a small team we have two different persons, and one of them is a platform manager and he's a CEO at the same time, like he's responsible about, you know, acquisition and growth and all of that. Like maybe any managerial position, not only the CEO, and definitely on the other side we have the software product manager, the one who's building, you know, the infrastructure and like and the other aspects of the platform. How should we deal, with a different person? Like, okay, this CEO, like this managerial position, focus on growth and acquisition, and the software product manager has a different point of view about this. So what do you think about this?
I think what you said is definitely better than the opposite. If the CEO is the technology person, this is a much worse situation than if the CEO is the one who's focusing on the platform, because the business mostly comes from the platform side and the technology enables that. So the CEO by nature should be focusing 100% on growth. So if he happens to be the same person as the one who's managing the platform in the early days, I think that's not a bad sign. But again, he needs to manage with the other responsibilities of hiring and fundraising and managing the platform is a very, very important task or job that shouldn't be prioritized lower than any other task, also fundraising, also recruitment. So if
Surviving,
the CEO is not able to manage those key things, maybe he needs to hire someone who's focused on the platform.
I would say something controversial, right? Because I would say the American mindset. Because when I first moved from Germany to the US, I got it backwards because the German mindset is you build the product first and then you figure out how to market it, right? Whereas in America, it's a little bit different. Like I remember, one of my executives told me once, product follows marketing. And that was so beautifully said that it didn't even raise any concerns that you would have with the German mindset, where you say, are you saying that the product doesn't exist yet, right? So if I had to then use that approach, which I totally agree with, I would say in the early beginnings, I would not focus on the software part at all, right? I would only focus on the growth part and trying to basically, let's say, I wouldn't even say value market fit. That's obviously always product market fit. Like product market fit is typically the typical term, but I would not even call it product market fit. I would call it value proposition market fit, or value product or value market fit. Is the value proposition even in there and being looked for and sought for by the market? That means in the beginning it's all growth, and then when you go back to the example that I gave regarding Stripe, where it's all done manually behind the scenes with no technology, that's how you then validate that it's actually in demand. And if there's demand, then you go quickly fill the gap and build it, right? That's my controversial take on that.
I want to thank you, Peter, for bringing this up, because this is exactly the mistake I've done in my previous startup. We started with a product first, and this is completely wrong. I wouldn't advise anyone.
But also, do you think, Peter, there's nowadays there's the right approach when you focus on growth, whatever at the early stage or later, and then you try to build the product and maybe you discover that your product is not fitting 100% with the market, but at the same time you have high potential and have numbers growing, but what you are trying to automate or innovate with is not fitting with the market. Do you think this applies now?
I would say yes, because I would say to Samira's point, right? It's very, very hard to build something where you don't know the exact requirements. That's why it's so hard to build a product if you do it the wrong way, right? Because you're building for any requirement. But the other way around, if you are basically just bringing in revenue, right, based on a vision that you sold, then you can actually much easier go in and then build that product. So I would say yes, it is. Like I said, I had to learn it myself, because when I moved to the States, it was a culture shock, right? Where it took me years to understand how that's not, because with the German mindset, it feels as if you're scamming customers, right? And a lot of people actually have that issue where they say well, how can I sell a product that I don't have yet, right? Whereas in this case, what you're doing is simply validating whether the value proposition even works. And if it does work, then you can hold the business. Let's say worst case is you oversold it to the point how Oracle did it back in the 90s, right? And then you almost go out of business. But obviously, a lot of us won't have that issue where obviously the vision that you sold will probably be something that you catch up on, let's say, in 6 months, right?
There is a fine line between validating your
Yeah.
business model and cheating your customers, right?
That's true. That's true. Yeah.
I would want to like focus on this point because usually as founders, we move quickly between validating the problem to wanting to reach the product market fit. But this is actually, there is actually a step in between that we forget, which is validating the solution problem fit. So we validated the problem, we know for sure. So we need to validate the solution, and it doesn't have to be using technology. It can be using a call center. It can be a very manual.
Exactly.
It can be using Excel sheets, a WhatsApp bot, WhatsApp group, whatever it is, Facebook group. It doesn't have to build a mobile app, a website, or a platform. You don't have to build the platform, physical platform first. So you have to validate the problem solution first, get it working, generate revenue, as Peter mentioned, and then start automating what you figured out using technology to scale. Unless you're building something like Stripe. So in that case, you have to build the product. But in most cases, this is not the case. You don't have to build the physical technological product first.
Absolutely, I couldn't agree more, Samira. And I think this idea of trying stuff out, as you say, to validate what you're doing and how you're going to go about solving the problem or the unmet opportunity or whatever is out there is really, really important. And people like want to just jump in and build the thing, right? But as you say, it's like, you know, the number of people who sort of do a startup saying, oh, we're going to build this two-sided marketplace and we're going to do this, this, and this, and say, well, before you jump in and build your app or, you know, spend all your seed funding on development, how's about you actually go and figure out whether anyone wants to participate in this marketplace? Yeah. Is there going to be demand on both sides? Can you build up a network of people who are interested in this thing, and then figure out, as Samira is saying, how to automate it when you've actually figured out that this is worthwhile doing? But this kind of idea, I think, is particularly interesting when you set out as your business to be a platform, whether it's a marketplace or whether it's a innovation platform, you know, kind of a technology platform you're expecting other people to take and integrate into other things. If you're setting out your business from the outset to do that, then you have this really challenging thing where you're kind of always jumping between, first of all, attracting the people to the platform, but then catching up with the platform to make sure it can do the things that people want to do, but then listening to what people are trying to do that they can't do, and then expanding it further and so on. So it's a really tricky thing. It's got many more moving parts than the more traditional product where you just solve a particular problem, you sell the product in, end of story. So this idea of kind of testing stuff out, testing out aspects of the complex multi-moving part thing by testing one part at a time and then trying different options for those parts so you can pick the best things out of that lot is so important. It's even more important with a platform.
I also want to build on what Jock was mentioning, testing separate parts. This is really important because we all know what's agile and what's lean, but on ground, no one is really implementing agile right. So we use agile to organize the work into sprints, but are we actually selecting the most valuable user story or scenario to tackle and testing it separately? So we don't have to start with building the login and the sign up. So this shouldn't be the start of building the product. So like really testing smaller parts that doesn't have to be at the same. So you can test something using WhatsApp group and another thing using phone call. And it doesn't have to really integrate. So you can test this and this that are not related at all and start one by one figuring out the different parts of your system and the components of your platform or product, and then you start building it properly. So you should start like quick and dirty with different parts that doesn't have to be next to each other, but you need to start with what's really important for the customer.
Jock, you raised your hand.
No, I was just thumbs up agreeing with everything Samira was saying there.
Okay. Okay. I would like I would like to go back to what Peter said before. I think you said that you could argue that every B2B product is a platform. I'm not so sure about it. What's your?
No, I agree. No, I agree. Like I was just saying, it was like a for the first time that it kind of popped up in my head. And when I say, I mean, it's like hard to say. Like, I mean, to your point, like it's very, very hard to make that argument that it is always a platform. But I think it generalizes and kind of pulls out all of the features that, let's say, each organization needs, and then requires each organization to really ask themselves, do we really need to build something ourselves, or could we possibly reuse an out-of-the-box product, right? And that's like I would say that's a question that oftentimes, let's say, some of these B2B platforms then also ask you, right? Like, do you really need to go ahead and build your own payment processing infrastructure and platform, or could you possibly, initially at least, right? Like, because eventually everyone's clear, or like everyone agrees that they should be using Stripe now. But let's say 5, 6, 7 years ago, it was a different conversation, right? Like where people would then evaluate Stripe and then conclude that it's not working. Or if you go back to, let's say, in the early beginnings of SaaS, where a lot of customers or like companies would say that they would never use anything in the cloud because it doesn't meet their, let's say, security standards. In 2022, it's probably the other way around, where no business in their right mind would use on-premise for the same reasons, right? So what I'm saying is that I agree. I wouldn't want to die on that hill to make that argument, but it kind of reminded me of how B2B products oftentimes have that same characteristic.
Well, here's another interesting thing. So will platforms conquer the world? You know, and we're kind of looking to these huge platforms like Google and Facebook and Apple, and we're saying, well, you know, they can't possibly fail. They're too big to fail. And then we see the headlines like Facebook had a sort of an internal leak that was showing how concerned they are about the demographic crisis they're facing. So let's put it in context. What's happening is Facebook has got a much older demographic than they want. They're not getting the new users, the younger users joining, yeah, because Facebook to them is their mum and dad's, you know, social media platform, not theirs, yeah. And so here's the problem. So if your entire business is predicated on having a huge number of users, and you know, let's face it, Facebook aren't in trouble yet, but if that audience goes away to something that's more fashionable, on trend, then you're left with no audience for your advertisers. You've got no audience for the app makers who are building stuff to sit inside Facebook Marketplace, you know, the app marketplace and so on. So suddenly, if all of your, you know, if one side of your marketplace disappears, then your platform is going to fail because everyone's already gone somewhere else. And I think
exactly.
this is the difficulty. And this is why any platform has to be so much better at innovating than its competitors, and either acquiring or diversifying to address the niche aspects that Samira was talking about. Because if they don't, they'll realize that they're standing still and everyone's moving faster than them, and then their market will just disappear from underneath them, and suddenly there'll be a platform with nobody on it.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's another interesting subject with these kind of transaction platforms. They all cheat, and we know that. I mean, if you ever work for an internet platform, you know they cheat because they count dead registrations. You know? And it was so funny that Elon Musk used that argument to get out of the Twitter deal. Because everybody knew that, and I'm sure he knew that as well.
Love it.
All right, it's already 10 minutes to 9. Thank you very much for this most interesting panel discussion. Before we finish, is there anything that you would like to add? Peter.
I mean, like I think you showed this slide earlier, right? Like a lot of different components, like how to go about it and whatnot. But I think there's one more component that, like one ingredient, like we don't have like have a long conversation about that. But like I think the slide that you showed had like Google, Apple, and others, and then there's like also the time component, right? Like no matter how creative or how smart you are and how good you are at actually capturing the customer demand, if you're on the wrong side of time, there's nothing you can do, right? Like there are certain network effects that are so strong, and if you're like the first to market or the first one who gets it right, then that's also like the valuation that you talked about, right? Like the valuation is not so much based on how good these platforms are, but more so around the fact that no one will realistically be able to challenge them or even beat them, right? So time is then oftentimes overlooked, and but that's like obviously the most glaring aspect in my opinion. Which then also means product management is oftentimes getting the timing right? So it's not only about like all these other things, but like are you truly picking the right time to go about solving a particular problem, right?
Absolutely.
I would say also quality is something that is really important to address when we're talking about platforms. So the whole idea from platforms in the beginning that the marketplace or would, especially the transactional platform, would filter itself via ratings and reviews, for example. But then when the platforms got so big, we see the tendency that the platforms put their own controls. So you would see, for example, Amazon having the tags like top seller, Amazon verified, and you would have also Upwork with the top talent tags. Like you can see that at first it started with community doing the control. And then you can see that whenever the platform grows, there is a tendency for getting back and doing their own vetting. So the quality aspect and how much the platform owner should interfere in vetting and ensuring the quality of the platform is a topic that depends on the stage and it's an important point to take care of, depends on the stage of the platform. So early on, it's really important. In the middle, somehow it's self-vetting, and when the platform is very big, you see a tendency to get back into imposing quality controls again.
Jock, you want to add something?
Yeah, I think Samira's point about being able to trust the platform, both in terms of, does it fulfill the job, but do you also trust it not to do something weird and wonderful with your information is super important. And, there's lots of examples, like Cambridge Analytica versus Facebook kind of situation to draw on from there. So I think for me, the kind of point I want to end on is that kind of concept of nothing ever stands still. Everything is evolving towards becoming a utility. So the price will reduce, the cost will reduce, the ease of consumption will get greater, and so on. And so really, if you're trying to build a company that expressly wants to become a platform, you have to think to yourself, how can we be not just the easiest, cheapest, quickest thing on the market right now, but how can we be the cheapest, quickest, easiest option to people in 5 to 10 years' time? Where do we need to get to remain, to basically stay relevant and stay ahead of all of these other people trying to eat our lunch?
So you are saying these kind of companies better have a long-term strategy?
I think they need to be aware that it's not just about the here and now. Your long-term strategy is only as good as your ability to understand your context and to see the market trends and to see what your competitors are doing and to see how technology and user demand is evolving. Because if you lose track of those things, because you're not doing a user research, because you're not engaging with the market, you'll be left behind. You'll go in the wrong direction.
All right, Mohammed, do we have any questions from the audience?
So guys, if you have any question, please either raise your hand or like text a message or like write a message in the chat box so we can have. And actually I have not like a serious question, but the main title of this meetup is Will Platforms Conquer the World? And you didn't ask the panelists about this question.
Okay. So what's your opinion?
I would say platforms are getting stronger, but there will still be some, I wouldn't say industries, but some services that cannot be offered by platform due to its, for example, criticality. So you cannot really get an ambulance through a platform easily. Like whenever the quality and the time criticality is very, very, very important, we will still see the need for the pipeline model where the quality is controlled firmly. But in all the other aspects, platform, yes, will conquer the world.
What's your view, Peter?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, yeah, hard to add anything other than what was already said there, but like, I would agree with that.
Mm-hmm. Jock?
I think platforms already have conquered the world. I think we're already there. All that's going to change is who is running the platforms and which platforms they are, and how complicated and higher level they become. But you turn on the TV, you pull up Netflix, that's a platform. Disney Plus, that's a platform. Your TV talks to Google, that's another platform. We're already there. There's very little of our lives that aren't already running on some kind of platform or combination of platforms. The question is, what higher order problems and challenges will these platforms evolve to tackle in the future?
Mm-hmm.
I think the next meetup, Handspread, we should talk about what after having all of these platforms, and should talk about the economy and what's behind them.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed the discussion a lot. I hope our audience has as well. So I wish you a great rest of the evening or rest of the day to Peter and Florian. And take care.
Thank you. Bye.
It was really nice
Bye-bye.
meeting you, Jacques, Peter, and Hans. Mohammed, good to catch up, and have a nice evening, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Bye-bye.